Welcome to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, where you can hear your favorite performers talk about how they got started, their careers, and everything in between. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Spotify at Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha, and on my main Broadway account at Broadway_Corner on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to Broadway Corner with Ashley Ha. I'm so excited you are here because it is our first episode of 2025, so Happy New Year. And it's a very special one because I'm talking to someone who's a part of one of my favorite Broadway shows right now, Maybe Happy Ending. It is Hannah Kevitt. Hi Hannah, how are you?
Woo! Hi, I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's your day off. We're just gonna chill, have some fun, talk about, your journey to Broadway with two Broadway shows. So I'll just read a little bit about you. So Hannah is a China-born, North Carolina-raised actor, singer, and dancer. She grew up in the tractor-loving small town of Hickory, North Carolina, which my dad's also from North Carolina, so
Wait, amazing.
North
Yeah, North Carolina.
Carolina. An uncertain whether college was the right choice for her. Hannah dove straight into theater after high school, performing regionally in the Southeast while also working towards an associate's degree. And then Hannah then attended Elon University and received her BFA in musical theater in 2023. And immediately upon graduating, Hannah moved to New York to make her Broadway debut in the original cast of Back to the Future. And after a year of being in Back to the Future, Hannah left the show to join her second original Broadway cast, it may be happy ending. So hi Hannah, so excited to be chatting with you
Hey, I'm so excited to
today.
be here.
I think you've had such an incredible journey. A little bit, you've called it unconventional, just a little bit, but again, just incredible. So it's good to see you in
Thanks.
this new year. And again, you've had quite the past 2 years being in two original Broadway cast of two new shows. But before we get to that, let's start with just talking about you. Can you talk
Okay.
about like your background, just where you grew up, like where you went to school, and how you discovered theater, especially in somewhere like North Carolina?
Yeah. I think it all started, well, I was adopted when I was 11 months old from China. And so my parents came to get me. And then I grew up in Hickory for my whole like young adult life. Um, And Hickory is like you said it in my little like description, but it's like such a little town and there's not a bunch of theater and but I remember when I was 4, my parents loved like Disney VHSs. Like that was a thing that we would do together. We would watch like Disney movies. And I just became obsessed. Like I loved the singing and the dancing and like my dad said when I was like 4, I would like run around and sing all the princess songs and create little dances and like that sort of thing. So he was like, "Oh, I think she would be good in theater. I think she would enjoy that." So they enrolled me in this like summer theater program at our community theater, and I had the worst stage fright ever. I was like on stage and we had to do these like little riddles or something like that. And all the parents were watching. It was in this huge theater to me, like this, little kid. And I just immediately started crying. And I was like of the fight, flight, or freeze, I froze. And so I just kind of like stood there crying and like didn't know what to do. And I was like, I'm never stepping foot on stage ever again. Like that was terrible. I hated it. But my dad was like so encouraging. It was like, you've got to get back on the horse. Like you gotta like conquer your fears and stuff. So, um, they also enrolled me in dance classes from a pretty young age. And so I kind of found my love of getting back on the stage through dance. And then, um, because I was so nervous to do theater again, my dad was like, I'll do it with you. So we did community theater together for a little bit. Um, yeah. So, and then I like started to fall in love with theater again, and like that's where like, the theater bug bit, and I was like, I love it here. And then I just kind of never stopped doing it. I did it, and then I went to a studio when I was like in third grade, in my hometown that was like singing, acting, dancing training, after school, and so I did that, and then until I was like a teenager. Yeah.
And then I was reading that you instead of doing like the whole BFA thing first, oh, 1 second. There we go. My computer screen took me away for a minute. But you went and performed professionally, like as a teenager, just graduating high school, and got your associate's degree, which is something that like most theater people maybe wouldn't do at first. So like, can you just talk a little bit about, since your journey was a little different, like what
Yeah.
that and how that helped propel you to then be prepared for a BFA.
Yeah. So after I finished high school, I was homeschooled from like so in seventh grade, I booked a JCPenney commercial. And I pointed to that to my parents to be like, look, I can do this. Like that was the first time that they realized that like you could get paid for doing theater and acting and these kinds of jobs. And so I was like, I need to be homeschooled so I can take my career seriously in like the seventh grade.
Oh my
And
God.
they were like, okay. And so I became homeschooled. I was able to dance and sing and take voice lessons and dance classes and that sort of thing. Um, until I was about 17. And then I was like, I just want to book Broadway right away. And so I auditioned for this production of Miss Saigon in Atlanta. And I remember going to my parents and I had this like PowerPoint presentation of like how I would get down there. Like they both worked, so they couldn't take me to these auditions. And I was like, so this is how I would do it. This is how much it would cost. And they were like, okay. So I went to Atlanta, I auditioned. Um, and then I didn't hear anything, and then I got it, and that was my first professional theater gig, which was such a cool experience. It was the Miss Saigon that had like the live helicopter, and it was like outside and like site specific, and like it was a
Wow.
crazy way to introduce myself to the professional theater world. But I was 17, and I just had like so much to learn, and I got to meet so many like right off the bat in my career. I got to meet so many amazing Asian artists. So that was awesome. And they all just like took me under their wing and they were like, okay, you're a baby. Like we're gonna take care of you. So anyway, so I did that and then I was like, I'm just gonna keep the ball rolling because I wanna book Broadway by the time I'm 18, you know. And so I did a few regional contracts where I was able to drive to the auditions and from North Carolina and that sort of thing. And so I did after Miss Saigon, I did South Pacific. I did a chorus line. I just like a few shows and I got to meet amazing people. And kind of in the middle of that, I was like, I feel like I need to learn more about the world. But I wasn't quite ready to commit to a BFA program or a program that would like keep me in one place yet because I was like I'm not ready to stop working. I thought I was like moving with some momentum, which I wasn't. I was like it was I was just, you know, young. But anyway, so then I went to community college and was like because at that point in my life I felt like I had some gaps in my knowledge where I felt like there were just things about the world that I didn't know how I felt about them or I didn't know. And then there were also gaps in my knowledge as like a performer, like singing and acting and dancing. So I was like, I want to help myself fill in those gaps if I can. So community college was really amazing because that's where I fell back in love with like learning because in high school I had totally like slacked off school wise because I was like, it doesn't matter. Like if you book Broadway, that's it. Like, you know, so but going to community college was amazing because I got to have other interests and learn for the sake of learning and do like music theory training and that sort of thing. And then from there, I had done a few contracts in between and I got like my yoga certification, that sort of thing. And then I did this production of South Pacific with Dan Calloway,
My
who
voice
you
teacher.
know. Yeah. He played our Emile DeBeck, and this was kind of in that like gap year thing. And I remember calling him after I finished my associates, and I was like, "Hey, I remember that you taught at the school called Elon. Like, how's that? Do you like it?" Or And he was like, yeah, I like it. Like, it's great. And he was like, are you thinking about coming? And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of torn in between whether I want to continue my training in in a brick and mortar building, like a collegiate setting, or if I want to move to New York and put together my own kind of curriculum and training while I'm trying to work. And so I was torn between those two things in my life at that point. I think it was like 18 or so. And Dan was like, hey, listen, both are valid, but if you want to come audition for Elon, do it in the fall. And I was like, okay. So I was doing a production of The Wolves at that point. And then I took some time off and I came to audition for Elon and I loved it. I loved the vibes. And the more I was like stepping into the university setting, I was like, okay, I think I could do this. And so I decided to go. I got in and I went and it was such a great decision in retrospect because I loved being able to be like, okay, I'm in North Carolina. I'm devoting this time to training. And that was about the time that COVID happened too. So it was like a great time for me to be doing something and learning. And while the theater industry was kind of on pause anyway, I was just really grateful that I got the chance to do that. And I knew that I was either going to have a college experience or not. And I'm grateful that I did. So anyway, and I got to fill in all those gaps of my knowledge in being a person and also being a performer by going to Elon. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you did it in such, what Dan said was such a smart way of like, making sure that you had a good foundation before even going to Elon and doing all the thing. And it's like it shows that, it's not always like BFA or bust for some people. It's like sometimes, you can your other option was to like make your own journey as well. And, Elon worked out, but it's like there's so many different avenues to go down. And obviously you didn't do BFA right after, high school. And like
Yeah.
it turned out pretty well for you.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my journey. Although it feels like wild, when you're like living it and you're like, I don't know what's next and
Yeah.
we're just gonna see. But in hindsight, it's like, wow, that was crazy how that turned out. Very, very
Yeah.
grateful.
Yeah, I mean, everything is meant to be how it turns out. So that was
Hmm.
definitely like your own journey that was perfect for you. And as someone who's currently in a BFA program, like what is something that you think you took from Elon that has like propelled you when it comes to, being on Broadway and just continuing to audition and be a working actor?
I think what I took away from Elon, what I loved about Elon's program when I went was that it was very like choose your own adventure. And so like you had, of course, your like core curriculum classes in your major and then also um any minor or anything else. And then also your like school classes, your academic courses that you had to take. But other than that, you could choose what kind of direction you wanted to take your classes. So it was like if you wanted to invest in your Shakespeare training, you could do that. If you wanted to invest in like taking more dance classes, you could do that. If you wanted to, I like dramaturged one time at school, like you could just choose how you wanted to approach your education. And it felt very like independent
Mm.
process where you were like, you had a meeting with your advisor and you would be like, hey, I see myself as XYZ, dancer, singer, whatever. Like, I would like to move my training in that direction. Or I feel really nervous about this part of my like performance. I would love to work on that? So I loved that part. And I think that that's something that I took away from school was just like a continuing check in with yourself because it's your own journey and everyone has their own way that they want to go about their career and it's like your career. So having that like autonomy is like really important to me. And even now, like thinking about navigating HO weeks and navigating like how Broadway works and I think I've taken that lesson with me to be like, okay, how am I doing? Where am I trying to go? And how can I help myself get there? So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's, it is important to really have agency over what you're doing, not just to let, what the professors or whoever is, like, going and telling you what to do. It's like it's good to, try to gauge like maybe what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then just either play to them or, focus on the things that you're not confident in. So I think that's like something to take into, anywhere. Or like it's just,
Yeah.
just be able to have agency and make choices that can, keep making you who you want to become.
Yeah.
We won't talk too much about Back to the Future because, we're here to talk about maybe happy ending a bit. And I know that was a quite a whirlwind process, you auditioning for that in your senior year at Elon.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the audition process for maybe happy ending? I mean, you were in a show already, and like, when did the audition come to you? When did it come across your radar? Like, just what was going into that like? Because I'm sure you didn't go into Back to the Future being like, I'm gonna book another show. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm here, I'm on Broadway, and then something magical like this comes along, and you're like, oh, let's go
Yeah.
here. Like,
I know, it's crazy. So I was doing Back to the Future. I had been doing it for about like months at that point. It was like almost a year, I think. And I most Broadway actors, from my understanding, keep auditioning because you're auditioning for workshops, you're auditioning for table reads and things. And also, when you're in a more long running show, people start auditioning for other things and other projects. And it's just like a constant thing that's happening. And that's something I didn't know because I was like, oh, when you book Broadway, you've made it and you stay there, you know? Um, but yeah, so I had been auditioning a little bit, but I was so happy at Back to the Future, and I was getting dinner with a friend of mine, and he's in casting, and he was like, "Oh, have you heard of this new show called Maybe Happy Ending?" And I was like, "No," and he was like, "You should look into it. You should ask your agents for an audition." And I was like, "Okay." And at that point, um, Darren and Helen had already been announced with the project. So he was like, you should look into seeing if they need a cover. So I was like, okay. So I went home, I like Googled maybe happy ending, and I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. I had seen like some of the promos from the Atlanta out of town, and I did a little more research and realized that it was a production in Korea. And I was like, okay, this looks great. And it had already been announced that it was going to Broadway with Helen and Darren. So I was like, okay, this looks awesome. So I reached out to my agents and I was like, hi, I've heard about this new show, was wondering if they were looking for any coverage at all. And they were like, okay, let's get you an audition. So they sent me an audition, and um they sent me along with the normal, like, these are the scenes we want you to do, this is the song we want you to do. They sent me the script as it was at that point.
oh
And
wow.
so I was like, okay. So I took a afternoon, and I just sat on my couch and I read the script, and I was like, wow. I like cried at the end because I was just like, and there was also like some demos in that little Dropbox folder as well. So I like played the demos along with the script that they had, and I was like, whoa, this is going to be so special. And it just felt like magic when I was reading it, and something that I had not experienced before. And I was like, okay, I really want this. And so I filmed my self-tape, um, and it was like a song from the show, and then I think a couple scenes maybe, and I sent that self-tape off to my agents. And that was probably in July. No, I sent it off in June. And then in July, I hadn't heard anything. And I was like, ah, dang, like I really like loved that and like felt really connected to the piece. But we had performed, Back to the Future was doing a performance at Broadway and Bryant Park in July. And I that was really cool because the I got to step into my understudy track that day for Jennifer, and JJ Neiman got to step into his understudy track as Marty, and we got to sing together, and we both went to Elon, so it was really cool.
Oh,
Anyway, so right after that, I'm headed back to the theater, and I get a call from my agent about something completely different. And then I was like, hey, could you just like check in on maybe happy ending? Like, I'm sure they've moved on by now. I'm sure they've cast someone, but like, I felt really good about that. And I'm just curious, like, if there was any feedback. And they were like, great. So then the next day, I get a call, and my agents are like, hey, funny story. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, we were about to email casting this morning to ask about feedback for you. And we ended up having an email in our inbox about you before we had even sent anything off about your availability for maybe happy ending. And I was like, what? And so at that point, it was like, hey, we still might need this Claire standby after all. What is Hannah's availability? What are her outs with Back to the Future? And my agents were like, hey, she has a 4 week out with Back to the Future. So as soon as she puts her notice in, she would just have to work 4 weeks after that. And they were like, okay, cool. We'll get back to you. Who knows what's going to happen? And so that was on a Friday. And my agents told me that. And I was like, oh, okay, perfect. Um, so that, sorry, my radiator's doing
Oh,
the
you're good.
radiator thing, if you hear that in the background.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that was like on a Friday, did that weekend of shows at Back to the Future. And then I had assumed that I would hear early in the week. And on Monday, I went to my first dance class of the year. And just because I was like, I had planned this for myself, it was something that I really wanted to do. So I went to dance class, and then I came out of dance class feeling great. And I had a voicemail from my agent. And I was like, oh my God. And it was like, hey, can you call me back? You have an offer. And I was like, oh my God. And I had been in for a few things, so I didn't quite know what it was. So, and of course, my phone is at like 2%. So
Oh,
I'm like, okay. So I can't even take an Uber home because my phone was gonna die. I have to take the subway home, and it's on the local line. And it's terrible, and it's taking 10 years. And I'm like shaking. I can feel my like fingers are tingly because I'm like just so excited and like nervous and have no idea what's gonna happen. So anyway, I run home. I call my boyfriend on FaceTime so that he can like film if something exciting happens. And so I call them back. I call my agents back, and they're like, "Hey, you have an offer for maybe happy ending for Claire Standby." Um, yeah. And I was like, "Oh my God." And I was like, I think in my video I was like, "And they're sure?" Because like they only saw a video of me. Like they don't want to like check in on I could be crazy. They have no idea.
yeah.
So anyway, they were like, "Yeah, they're sure." And so I that day, right after I called all the people that um I needed to call to be like my parents and my best friends and those things. And then I started drafting my notice for Back to the Future. And so the next day, that Tuesday, I sent off my notice, and then I did my last 4 weeks of Back to the Future. And then I had like 3 weeks off in between, and then I started Maybe Happy Ending. It was wild.
Oh my God.
I It's insane. I can't believe like sometimes when I tell the story, I'm like, wow, that's insane.
Yes. So just the fact that that happened all in like maybe a month or so, and the fact that I think Chris said that they only saw a video of him as well. Like they were very confident, it seems like, with their casting of Understood or the standbys. I'm like, that's a lot of faith into some self tapes. Like they have no idea what you're like in real life. But I
I
think
know. It's a lot of trust that they put in us.
yes, and obviously they were right. So, there's
Thanks.
literally no worries there because it all worked out perfectly. And yeah, oh my God, that's so much to think about and just like trusting and you putting so much faith into the script and just your performance of it, I'm sure. And just when you are so connected to something and you want something so bad, sometimes it does work out, which is really cool. And like
Yeah.
dude, what was like the first thing you did when you got it? Besides like calling everybody and drafting your notice? Like was there a treat or something that you did for yourself?
It was the most overwhelming, like feeling because also I was alone. Like my roommate was out of town and my boyfriend was out of town. And so I was just like sitting in my apartment alone, being like, I feel like I should do something. Like I feel like what's and so I called my dressing room girls at Back to the Future. It was like me and three other girls in this dressing room. And I got so close with them. Like they are like sisters to me. And I was telling them, I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And they were like, oh my God, you have to do something. We're gonna celebrate. So my friend Kimmy, who is like my Asian big sister at Back to the
Yeah.
Future.
I saw her at
She,
Wicked, I think. I saw
yeah,
her in
she
Back
played
to the
Nessa.
Future. Yeah, yeah.
She's, oh my God, she's the best. And she was like, I'm taking you out to dinner. So we went out to dinner together to like celebrate, and it was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good to make sure you do something like celebratory. I mean, people do that all the time, even just after like auditions, just to make sure, you're like having that positive reinforcement of like, oh, I did that. And then, when something big happens, you're like, let's do something else, like really big,
Right.
to celebrate. So I'm so glad you got to do that. Um,
Thanks. It was such a whirlwind too. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And also I kept being like, I had this fear that they were going to take it back.
oh my
I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to take it back. I can't tell anyone. I've told
God.
everyone.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, sometimes you're like, oh, you're like, oh my God, is it really happening? And then you second guess and you're like, oh wait, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when it came to researching and like in those couple weeks that you had, I guess, like what did you do to, I guess, prepare? 'Cause I mean for myself, just as a fan, I've been doing like the deep dive on YouTube of like all the Korean stuff, like all the Korean productions, and then even like there's the Chinese production and stuff like that I didn't know about till later, and like listening to the cast recordings that they have in Korean on Spotify and like doing all that stuff. So like what did you do to like prepare? Because at that point you just had like the demos and the script. So it's like what did you do to kind of prepare yourself to enter that world?
So I had 3 weeks off in between Back to the Future and starting Maybe Happy Ending. And um that Broadway is a very rigorous job. It is the dream job, but it's also so hard. So I remember talking to my therapist and my voice teacher and the people in my life and being like, I think I need like a break. And so because I had not really had a break since I graduated school and went straight into Back to the Future. I finished my last final, drove my car home, flew up here, moved into my apartment, and then started rehearsals for Back to the Future the next day. So it was wild and a whirlwind. So, and that kind of just all rolled into my contract there and my time there, which was so amazing. Um, and so in that, it was like 3 weeks in between. So from the first 2 weeks, I gave myself time to be like, I'm not thinking about any theater. I'm going to Disney World, um, which was so amazing. I went home to visit my family because that's not something I really get to do when I'm working here. And I also went to go like sit at my boyfriend's family's lake house, which was wonderful. So for those like first 2 weeks, I was like, I'm taking a break. And then when I came back for that last week, the week before we started, I remember while I was at Disney World, I had texted our stage manager of Maybe Happy Ending, Justin, and I was like, hey, like, wanted to know if I could get those demos back so I could like start studying and looking at things for rehearsals. And he was like, actually, our music team wants to build this sound with you. So they don't really want you to listen to anything that has to do with the show because they want to hear what your interpretation of it is. So I was
Oh.
like, okay, which made me nervous, but also so excited. And so I didn't have like a lot of prep work to do because of that. So I just read the script a bunch. I did a little light research on the other productions and the history of the show and that sort of thing. But it was clear to me that we were gonna make this like the Broadway production this like living, breathing thing. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going in open-hearted and open like and ready for anything kind of thing. Um, I've also never been a standby before, so I was like ready to learn how to do that too. So yeah, once we started rehearsals, I had like read the script, but I hadn't done a lot of deep dive, and I was just ready to get started. And then once we started, started to become more clear of what they wanted and their vision of what our rehearsal process was going to look like,
hmm
you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's so special that they were like, let's build this from, the ground up and figure out what it means to you instead of doing something that was already done before. Because obviously
Yeah.
that's not interesting for anybody to see, and they want to see your original interpretation. And I love the show. I think it's so much fun. It's like it's packed into those 90 minutes, but there's so much that happens in the 90 minutes. And so, do you have like a favorite moment and maybe happy ending? You haven't officially gone on yet, but you've had a couple like put-ins and things to, get the feel for what it's like to really do the show. And so, do you have a favorite moment in the show?
I think my favorite moment to watch is I got to watch the show a lot during previews. Like as an offstage cover, most of my job is to just watch and be able to like process and like save all of the changes that we've done. And so I got to watch a lot during previews. My favorite part to watch with an audience is, without spoilers, is the end scene. Because there's a little bit of like a surprise for the audience and like getting to hear those reactions in real time, especially for something that has an original IP, that's like an original musical, like because no one knew what to expect. So those first few preview audiences were just like shocked and like dropped in and were listening to every word. It was just such a cool experience to sit in the audience for that part. And then my favorite part to do throughout rehearsals and our put-ins and things like that is um, when they arrive on the ferry, when Claire and Oliver arrive to Jeju, and they're on the like ferry platform, and they look at each other and they like sing the words like, "Did you imagine we'd ever make it this far?" And when I've done it both with Chris, who understudies Oliver, and with Steven, who understudies Oliver, for both put-ins, it just is like such an amazing checkpoint in the show. And you like look at this person that you've done like the whole show thus far with and are about to finish out the show with, and you're like, okay, we're doing it. It's like a great check-in moment, and it feels so like epic the way that the music was written as well. So anyway, I think that's my favorite part to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's such a good one. I love the way that they, have all these different moments for you guys to like, because it is really mostly just the two of you the whole time.
Yeah.
A couple like, some added stuff, but it's like you're just there with the whole show.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite song in the show? Maybe one that Claire sings or one that she doesn't sing?
I think How Not to Be Alone is like the most gorgeous song in the show. And especially how Helen J. Shen does it is just like so beautiful and um like it's such a pivotal point in the show for Claire. And it just feels so honest and open and just like sharing that with the audience. And of course, like the song and the lyrics and the music are beautiful. So anyway, I think that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's become one of
Do
my
you
favorite.
have a favorite?
I don't. I'm like trying to think now because I was obsessed when I first started listening to it. I was obsessed with the way that it has to be, just because it was like
Hmm.
so jumpy and fun, and then listening to seeing it on stage, and then doing my research online and seeing what people have posted of the Broadway versions. I was like, this is such
Yeah.
incredible music, and I can't wait for the cast recording coming out soon. Hopefully soon. I don't know when, but exciting. I also have been loving How to Not Be Alone, like both listening in Korean and in English. I'm like, I just think it has so much like heart in it. And this was a question I had for you later. I was like, what moment spoke to you the most? And because for me, I think it was that song, of just being like, oh my God, it's how to exist with someone else when it's like you've been so used to being by yourself and how difficult that is and how it's like there's no way to really explain it. I'm just like, oh man, them trying to, invite each other into their lives when, for so long they've just kind of been going one route and then now they've kind of gone another way and they can't go back from it anymore. So,
Yeah, exactly. They've changed each other. It's
yeah.
amazing.
Do you have a moment that like really stuck with you first when you read it or first when you saw it in rehearsals or something?
I remember gasping when I was sitting and reading it for the first time during the her flashback scene, during Claire's flashback scene where she kind of explains why she feels the way she does about owners and humans and that sort of thing. And I remember for that moment I like sat and gasped. I was like, "Oh my God." Like so I remember that moment pretty vividly, and then in rehearsals I remember the first time that they did all of um the Hitting the Road part one into Goodbye My Room into Hitting the Road part two where they get out of their room.
Mhm.
Um I remember that was really amazing to watch, to be like, okay, like this transition is amazing because we had kind of done it in like little pieces. So the first time they put that all together, that huge chunk of the show, was really exciting.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. So I love the hitting the road and then into that, and then kind of like the little sandwich that it is. I remember seeing like the clip from the promo video of hitting the road and being like this song's really catchy, and then finally seeing it on stage, I was like, wait, I love this whole sequence. It's so cute. I think the show is really cute too. It's like it just there's no way that you can watch it and not be happy by the end, and like a more sad happy, but still really happy. Um,
Yeah, it's
what
special.
what is it like working with Hwaboom?
Um, I don't know. I haven't quite made up my mind about Hwaboon because also I think we're making up presently because during the our first put in, Steven was playing Oliver, I was playing Claire, and there's like a carry-in moment like right when Claire is introduced and my leg like brushed Hwaboon as like Steven was carrying me and Hwaboon like tipped over like this and like fell on the ground and we had to hold for the put in and like have like a props person come out and like check Hwaboon and make sure like all was well. So anyway, I think we're presently like making up for that with our relationship. That was tough a little bit, but I think we're on the mend.
Okay, good to know, good to know. I was like,
Yeah.
Hwaboom has just, been called a diva, been called a nepo baby. There's been so much said about Hwaboom, and so I'm like, I think it's just very important to make sure we know what's going on with
Exactly.
And as an actor, like, how did you approach Claire's movement? Because she is more like human-like than Oliver and a little more advanced, but she is obviously still a robot. So it's like, was there like a thing that you did when it regards to just movement or testing it out and just seeing what the differences could be rather than Hannah and then Claire, what the that kind of thing is. Did you have a process for that?
I think it was a combination of watching Helen do it, seeing where she was coming from, seeing what Michael's vision was for what Claire was supposed to move like, and then figuring it out on my body. I come from a dance background predominantly, and so I started with a pretty like rigid, like this is how a robot would move in my body, I think. And then like smoothing it out is because the Model Fives have a more complex and like nuanced way of operating. Um, Will and Hugh, our writers, were also like pretty adamant with like the style of the singing and the way that she moves and the way that she speaks and has sarcasm and things like that. That she's just a more advanced model. So anyway, just starting from like really like zero of like this is like super rigid to like trying to find where that flow is for her. Um, yeah, and so I'm still playing with it. I don't quite
Yeah.
know yet, but yeah.
Yeah. No, like I totally wish I could see like everyone do, all their understudy tracks and standby tracks and things like that just to see like all the differences because they are so nuanced. And even just going to see the show again and like observing how Darren and Helen do it is like there is such specificity, I think, in both of their performances. And as robots, you're like, this is kind of cool just to see, people and actors, go into that and I know there's like always a process for that kind of thing, so it's really cool just to hear about. And what do you hope audiences learn from maybe Happy Ending?
I listened to Chris's episode of this and he had such a good answer, but I don't want to steal his answer, so I'm gonna think of a different one. Um, what do I want audiences to learn from maybe Happy Ending? I think that I want them to take away that we need each other. We need like I think it has been said about this production is like even though the show is about two robots, it is like such a human story. And we can ascribe so many human experiences to the show and to what Claire and Oliver are experiencing in such a like a pure way. And it feels like this show makes me feel like these really hard concepts like grief and love and loss. But presented to you in like the way that a Pixar film makes you feel, where it's like still like digestible and not like despair. It's more about like so I think I want our audiences to take away that there is hope and that we find that in one another.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I love it. I think, yeah, like everything that you said, the show is like the Pixar for Broadway right now.
Yeah.
And I think everyone who likes that feeling when you watch a Pixar movie should go see the show. Of just like, yeah, it's heartfelt, it's gut-wrenching at times, and you're just like, oh my goodness, watching it. But it's we do need each other as people and as like to have this connection. And these robots, if they can find it, so can we. Um,
Exactly.
and so it's like it's just the hope. It's a hope story, I think, of just
Yeah.
for the future, and then maybe the hope for the next time that you don't just close yourself off. That there's always and more opportunity to connect with each other. And how
Yeah.
did it feel for you to be in a room full of Asian creatives doing the show? Because that is
So
something.
special.
That is something I have yet to experience, but something that I'm striving for in every sense, like, of the future, just hoping for. So what was that like for you?
It's so special. Like every time I have been fortunate to be in a couple shows with a predominantly Asian cast. And I have done a bunch of shows that haven't been, but every time that it's like an Asian cast, it feels like fam, like immediately, which is a really, really special feeling. Um, but also, I think what's so exciting to me about this show is that. Um, it isn't being like marketed as like this Asian show. It's like this is just a show about these robots and it happens to take place in Korea, so we happen to have Asian actors. But that's it's like normal, which I think is something that's like a huge step for Broadway and a huge step for where we are. I did this project in college. About um, specifically women of color in theater. And my friend Kelly did it, and we were talking about a lot about how we were moving from, or the goal was to move from the celebration phase to the normalization phase of like celebrating the first Asian person to play a superhero, the first Asian person to play a da 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 da, or win an Oscar or whatever. And now I think what's so exciting to me is that I am in real time getting to experience us moving into the normalization phase, which is the most fulfilling thing for me as an Asian American actress.
Yes, no, I love that. And what you said about how this isn't marketed as like an Asian show, like in none of the sense it was like this is Asian people doing an Asian production, whatever. And I have really loved that about this production, how it's just like a story that speaks to everyone and just happens to feature Asian performers. And you guys are still celebrating that in every sense, but it's not the focal point of why the show is happening. It just happens to be like that. And so, yeah, what you said about going from celebration to normalization, I think is so important, and how we are seeing the progression. There's still a bit a way to go, but at least there's something
Yeah, always.
have, at least there are some things that have been going straight, more into normalization. We saw with like even just the Wicked movie and how Asian people were in that, or just things like that, and how we're not just like the token anymore. We don't have to be just the only person. It's like we can be multifaceted and be very layered because there's more than one Asian person on stage, which I think is the most important thing, so that it's not just the only focus anymore. Um,
Yeah, like when I talked to Helen about this a lot, is like I didn't really grow up having a dream role. And to me, like I was telling Helen, I was like, if I was a little girl, like if I was a little Asian girl watching this show, this would be my dream role. And it feels so, so special to be able to work on something like that.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I do have to say it's one of my dream roles now. So
Oh my
crossing
God, that's so exciting.
happen. It'll happen someday. I think I told you when we met in New York about this, how even just like the way that she sings, I'm like, oh, this is something that's like what I do. Normally it's not like I'm not a crazy belter by any means, like with most of the stuff that's on Broadway, but it's like it's a very sweet and like comforting score. It's not like too much in any way, and it fits like, more with my voice type and what I always think of when I would want like an absolute dream role, and just the layers that she is really able to, have in a character. It's like it's everything that anyone would really ever want. So it's like, of
Yeah.
course, it's gonna be a role that I think, I've had like dream roles, but this is maybe one that I don't feel like I'm like forcing myself into. It's like, oh, that's perfect.
Hmm.
It would be great.
Right.
Um,
I felt very similarly. I felt like when I read the script, I was like, I can do this. And which is crazy because in my time at college, I felt like I never wanted to be singing a solo. I never wanted to act by myself. I was so comfortable being a dancer, and I thought that my career was going to be in ensembles. And so this show really came out of nowhere for me. And like this dream that I had to do it came out of nowhere. And it's like so intimidating for me, but so exciting. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to do it.
yes, no, I'm like, that's so exciting for you to have something that is so perfect for you. I think that, things fall into place the way that they always do. And so, uh,
Yeah.
it really worked out this time. And what does representation mean to you when it comes to, I guess, just being Asian in the theater space? It's not something that we, I guess, strive to be like the first or whatever, but it happens sometimes. And, just what does representation mean to you?
I think for me, representation means um it always reminds me of this when I was working at this theme park in North Carolina. It's called Carowinds. It borders North Carolina and South Carolina. And I was a part of like this singing Christmas show thing. And it was at the front of the park, and I was like doing the show, and there were like 5 shows a day or whatever it was. And afterwards, this little girl came up to me, this little Asian girl, and she was like, her and her mom came up, and her mom was like, the whole time, her daughter was like, that's me, like pointing to me. And it has stuck with me for the rest of my career because um, getting to look at a stage and being like, oh, I could do this, um, is something that I personally really strive for in my career goals, to play roles that like in Back to the Future, I thought it was a huge deal that I booked the show because it wasn't because I was Asian. It was because I did the role how they wanted me to, And I think I think I was the first um Asian Jennifer. And I got to rehearse with Daryl Tofa. And so we got to like our put in was like Asian Marty, Asian Jennifer. Like that was really cool. So like anytime those things happen, it just feels like really, really special. Um, because of that little girl, because I was the little girl. I used to watch like Lea Salonga's audition for Miss Saigon like over and over and over again because I was like, this means that I could do this.
Hmm.
And like that your dream feeling like a reality is something that I think is really, really important for young actors.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's so beautiful. And the fact that that happened at a theme park,
Yeah.
that's really cute. And just that, we know what it's like to be the little girl wanting to maybe, figure out what the reality is like. But then when people get to see someone like you on a stage or like Helen, they're like, oh, I can do it. It's a reality. It's not like, oh, how is this gonna happen? It's like, no, it's right there in front of me. There's a possibility. And so I think that's what you and the rest of the cast are really giving to people who are watching. And I'm sure so many little kids are seeing the show and just being so inspired by you guys because it is doing so much for representation right now on Broadway. I think like the past few shows that have been featuring Asian performers have been the celebration phase, and now it's the again normalization. So I love that for you and for everybody involved with maybe happy ending of just
Yeah, it's cool.
the really positive impact that you guys are making. So thank you. Um,
Thank you.
and as one of the people who is impacted by that, I'm like, just thank you. It's been such a wonderful journey to follow everyone and get to see it go from like the rehearsal room to the stage of like, oh, but this is such a cool show. I've like been telling everybody about it, truly, truly everybody.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate you.
oh, of course. And what is your advice for those little kids who would want to pursue performing and just anyone who's like, oh, I like Broadway. Maybe this could be for me.
Hmm. I think um my advice would be similar to what I talked about in like the university setting, like figure out how you tick. I think that's been like such a big life lesson for me recently is like figure out how you need to warm up, how you need to like I know that like I have to schedule in friend time in a week because I otherwise I will go crazy. Like I am not the kind of person that can just train and do my job and like I have to have like friend time to fill my cup. And like sometimes self-care means like going to that friend's birthday party or like whatever. But also sometimes like getting to know yourself as being like, okay, actually I have to say no to that because I need to spend time working on this or I need to, like just figuring out, I think I'm still on that journey of trying to figure out what works best for me and being okay with that. And figuring out what my goals are so that I can adjust my priorities and ebb and flow as I need to for my life and my career and
Mhm.
me as a person because that's also important.
Yes, definitely. It's good to have a good balance.
Yeah.
No, and especially being, at school and stuff too. It's like you can start that anytime. And
Yeah.
you're just taking care of yourself and being good to yourself because, we are our instrument and our job, whatever. And so it's like might as well take the most care that we can with ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
how can everyone listening like find you online or just continue to support you? Anything else that you have going on? Like just whatever you want, you can plug whatever you want right now.
Oh my God. Well, you can follow me. You can follow me at Instagram, which is like Hannah dot like period Kevitt, my last name. I'm also on TikTok, under Hannah Kevitt. I'm also controversially thinking of starting a YouTube channel. So if anybody would be interested in that, let me know because
I think
I'm
you should.
scared to do that
I
too.
think you 100% should. I mean, I've seen your vlogs on TikTok. I think you should do it. Definitely.
Thanks. So yes, I'm thinking about that. But until then, I just have those two things, and yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah. Well, Hannah, it's been so nice getting to chat with you all about just your journey to Broadway, about maybe happy endings, something we both love so much. And I'm so excited to just continue to see you grow and on Broadway and hopefully get to see you go on someday, hopefully. Um,
Yeah.
that would be the absolute coolest. But thanks so much for being on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Yes, thanks to everyone listening, and we'll keep talking about maybe happy ending. But
Yeah.
that you enjoyed, and thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Broadway Corner with Ashley Haw. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time.